Lester, Wushu engineer. Dummies. Some sources state that dummies have been used in Kung Fu training or practice from as early as the 12th century. And we all have a picture in our heads of the dedicated traditional martial artist alone in his training hall, smashing away at an uncompromising, uncaring and undefeatable dummy. We all sort of had that romantic notion in our heads. But dummies are far more common than that in martial arts. They're used in almost all martial arts, in fact, and almost all combat training. They're just a bit simpler than the image that might be in our head right now. And I'll show you a bit of a clip of Sherilyn demonstrating some work against a type of dummy that's almost ubiquitous in martial arts and combat training. So of course, bags of both simple and complex design are used across the board in martial arts and are in fact very simplified versions of a dummy, or essentially a simulation of an opponent. But usually people associate dummies in martial arts with a traditional dummy, such as the Wing Chun wooden dummy, for instance. Now, the central principles in practice against the Wing Chun wooden dummy are center line, connection to center of gravity, structure and alignment, limiting your opponent's space, correct footwork, constant movement, conditioning, timing and application of power. And I have to thank Sifu Scott Cohen, who's the head of Walloon Martial Arts in Ipswich, Queensland, for his performance in the following clip. I'll leave his contact details in the description below. So contrary to popular belief, condition is not actually the main focus of training on a rigid dummy, although it does play a part. Although the Wing Chun dummy has become synonymous with traditional dummies and has been adopted by many martial arts, there are many other types of dummies that have been used throughout the history of Chinese martial arts. I'll leave a link in the video description below to a really great article detailing a brief history of dummies in traditional Chinese martial arts. As far as my own system of Kung Fu or Wushu called Chang Hong is concerned, we've inherited a dummy form from our master Chen, who developed the form around a relatively recent technological innovation in dummy design, based partly on older four-armed Bagua striking dummies, and perhaps some elements from the Choi Li Foot styles of dummy that have been used in Choi Li Foot schools in the past. It's called the iron dummy because it's typically constructed of steel and occasionally out of aluminium for ease of transport. The principles in the use of the iron dummy are similar to those used in the Wing Chun dummy practice, except that it involves more circular stepping and movement around the dummy. So I'll show you a little bit of footage of me on the iron dummy. So why were dummies used? What are the advantages? Well, there are a few advantages that are immediately obvious. First of all, it's convenience, because where training partners were not always available, it was really good to have something that simulated a training partner to spar against. And of course, I'll say here right now that training with a dummy is no substitute for training with a human partner, because a human partner, of course, is a free-thinking, planning individual and can offer you challenges that you'd never be able to get with a standard traditional dummy. I'd say that the other advantage associated with training against a wooden dummy is that they're sometimes referred to as the invincible training partner. One can use techniques on the iron dummy that you would never really be able to use against a training partner effectively, because it could hurt your training partner, so there's no fear of hurting the dummy. And I would say that the last advantage of using dummies is perhaps the most interesting, and the one that I would like to kind of elaborate on a little bit more in this video, which is that dummies are, by their very nature, they are non-human opponents. That has pros and cons. Of course, if we're talking about a passive, non-reactive dummy, it's actually, you could say, is almost subhuman, because a human opponent is always going to be more cunning and more skilled than a dummy. But by virtue of the fact that dummies are non-human, artificial opponents, they can possess some limited superhuman characteristics, such as superhuman stability, for instance, superhuman mass, potentially, especially for the dummies that are mounted solidly in the ground. Precision, and you might find it hard to understand when I say precision, because the dummy itself is not moving, but the angles of attack that are simulated by the vectors in the rigid arms and legs are very precise strikes, or can be seen to be very precise strikes that the practitioner has to move around and work around. In addition, there is superhuman toughness and endurance, and of course the rigidity of the dummy is superhuman. And these are all very limited superhuman characteristics. So why is it an advantage to train against an opponent that possesses superhuman characteristics? Well, in one of my instructor's words, you train so that your bruises become your opponent's bruises, which is a bit of a funny way of saying, you know, it's hard when you first start training against a dummy, or it can be hard, but eventually your skill level increases to the point where sparring against a softer human opponent is not quite so jarring. Training against superhuman fighting characteristics can enhance our own human fighting abilities to the point where we can break through plateaus in our training. It may be theoretically possible to develop fighting skill that wouldn't have otherwise been possible due to the stimulation of fighting against superhuman aggressors. So what about the future of dummies in martial arts? Well, what if the technological development of dummies does not end with the passive reactive dummies that we associate with traditional martial arts? In fact, what if they develop into cunning superhuman training robots that take the superhuman characteristics of artificial dummies to the next level? I'll play a few clips now showing some of the advances in modern robotics, and most of you will have seen some or all of this footage, but consider bringing some or all of these concepts together into a training dummy. What would that training dummy be like?
Spot is the third prototype to come out of the project. The first robot was about the size of an ox and weighed about 1,200 pounds.
So what about the future? We might start seeing robot fighting partners that we've only seen or read about in science fiction stories. Robot fighting partners such as the Star Wars training drone, for instance.
stretch out with your feelings. You see? You can do it.
Or the deadly bladed spinning dummies as seen in the Edge of Tomorrow film. Or my all-time personal favorite, the automated fighter seen in the controversial 1984 movie adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune.
Activate a fighter.
In fact, I based an experimental prototype of a passive reactive dummy on the Dune fighter drone. I called it Wilson. It's a bit worse for wear now and it's starting to fall apart, but I'll show you a little bit of footage of me playing around with it. Now there have been some modern attempts to create reactive dummies, such as the reactive punching bag in the following clip. These are really exciting developments.
This is Bot Boxer, a first ever robot for martial arts. It can feel velocity and direction of your every shot. It can see and track your moves to spot any hook or jab from you. It will react to move away from your fist and escape the oncoming punch with a velocity unattainable, even for a pro.
Through the use of increasingly more reactive, cunning, and tactical robotic sparring partners, martial artists of the future may have access to fully superhuman sparring partners for the very first time. And what will this do for the development of their combat skills? In addition, future dummies could incorporate advanced feedback systems, which indicate levels of force, pressure, acceleration, power, and energy. This feedback could give a much better indication to future martial artists of their personal progress. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video clip. It's taken a bit of time to put it together. Once again, it's a slightly longer clip. Leave a comment in the comment section below if this is something of interest to you, yeah, leave a like, and if you're interested in this content, don't forget to subscribe to support the channel and also for more channel content in the future. Thanks, I'll see you later.